Welcome to the Masters Alliance. I am Herb Perez, and today we are joined by a very special guest, Grandmaster Leon Preston. He is an amazing individual. I want you to sit down and relax and enjoy this podcast and video as Leon Preston shares his thoughts on refereeing, life, education, and the future of Taekwondo for the modern masters. Okay, welcome to the Masters Alliance podcast Uncut. And I'm proud and honored to have as my third episode, great referee, great master in Taekwondo, one of my seniors and someone who reffed a lot of my matches and I have a great amount of respect for. We have worked together over the years in various programs. Most specifically, we created the USA Taekwondo's program for referee, athlete, and coach development that was implemented many years ago. And now I'm excited that we're working on a new project for the WTMU and its education efforts to develop the best masters in the world through continuing education. I want to welcome Grandmaster Master Leon Preston. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you, sir. Welcome to you too.
I know we want to get started. We got a lot of things that we're talking about, a lot of things that we're doing. But I want to ask you a few questions. I mean, we're going to take this to a different place. We're talking about a different model for development in Taekwondo that goes beyond just what we consider to be good education. So how do you integrate the philosophy of Taekwondo into your teaching and emphasizing components like discipline, respect, perseverance, and self-control? Could you share some examples of how you would integrate that into your personal teaching method?
Yeah, sure. The way I have evolved my teaching method and teaching style it's been a long journey, really. And that journey started back when I was a young kid. You know, in my day, the only big time sports that kids played, and we played every one of them all day long, it seems like, was basketball, baseball, track, and football. And I didn't know anything about Taekwondo really when I was a young kid, because it just wasn't well known then. Now, you got to remember, I'm way older than you, so I'm talking way back into, when I started Taekwondo, it was probably back in the mid 60s, man. And in those days, there were really very, very few young kids in Taekwondo. It was mostly a young adult and adult sports. And also, the word Taekwondo was something that was rarely heard when I started Taekwondo class. It was called Korean karate. And it was all basically ITF back in those days. And all of the instructors I shouldn't say all, many of the instructors back in those days were not fluent in the English language. And so the way we learned Taekwondo was watch me, follow me, do what I do. Very little explanation, just do what I do. And so we didn't really learn. I mean, we learned the kicks, we learned the punches, we learned all those kind of things. But the philosophy behind what we were doing and how it might apply to our life every day in our decision making wasn't there. Of course, we heard words like, oh yeah, courtesy. And we heard words like integrity, you know, the basic tenets of Taekwondo. They're still around today. Courtesy, integrity, self-control, perseverance, indomitable spirit. And so throughout the years, I always thought, you know, in playing other sports, I tried to figure out how do these things relate to what I'm doing out here on the field or on the court or on the track, because they were words. And being a young guy, you know, even in college, I mean, yeah, I knew what courtesy meant, but it was a word. The process of how to act those things out in everyday life in terms of a process, we never really walked through that in class. We just heard the words repetitively spoken to us. Do this, do that. This is courtesy. So we learn by example, which in many ways is okay. But that started my journey to thinking about how do these tenets relate to everyday life? How would I use them if I were trying to make a decision? And then when I really started teaching Taekwondo, based on my graduate education, and I have a master's degree in social work. I'm a licensed social worker. I've practiced every level of social work, from administration to program development to one-on-one individual counseling, treatment, etc. But I always came back to the point when I was teaching and got primarily into teaching kids was it's about messaging. And so I'm going to get to your point a little more clearly right now. Anyone who's ever worked with kids know that you can talk 1,000 words to them, but you've got to figure out how to message to them the meaning of what you're saying so that they can understand in their worldview, in their life, what that means to them. And so one of the biggies for me was taking my graduate education really and trying to apply that to teaching Taekwondo. I really thought a lot about things like teaching what commitment, how does commitment look? When you're committed to something, what are you doing? How does hard work look? What does that mean to you in everyday life? If you're working hard, what does that look like? What does it feel like? Or what might it feel like to you? Things like effort. What is that? How do you know when you're putting in effort? And how does it apply to the decisions that you have to make in everyday life? Things like, of course, perseverance is one that transfers over, I think, pretty easily. Keep going, try hard, but really perseverance is all about hard work and effort too. And the most important one to me is helping young people understand the concept and the notion of being resilient, right? We live in a world, they live in a world where they're going to be judged. They're judged every day. We're judged every day in everyday life. And really to think about the issue of not if someone's judging you, because that's going to happen. We don't value that really. And the question is, how do we? So all I'm saying here, Herb, is that that's what I teach in my classes. Yeah, I have the Taekwondo tenets up there on the wall and all of that, but the real teaching, the real learning, is about the things I just mentioned: hard work, effort, commitment, and resilience. And those are the kind of social, emotional life skills that I emphasize in every motion, everything I speak in class.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask you those questions, because I know that you're among a group of rare people. We've had a few of them on this podcast who have transcended what we learned in the old school styles of Taekwondo. And as a result of that, what we were able to accomplish in the sport itself. Then we took that and we went into different arenas. And you're certainly a great example of someone who went into the educational arena and then the professional arena and transcended those as well. But more importantly, found a way to connect your academic self with your physical or sports self. Towards that end, what teaching methods do you find effective with Taekwondo learners? And do you use a particular education model or a blend approach?
Wow, that's a deep question, man. Let me try to offer some thoughts on that by saying this. I believe in the concept of lifelong learning, and I talk with my students about that and try to demonstrate with them what learning on a continual basis looks like as you evolve every day. So that's one concrete methodology. Another is one of the things that I did a lot of research on when I was on faculty at the University of Washington is that I was involved with a premier researcher that developed a concept called healthy behaviors. And I took that model and I try and use it or integrate it into what I do in class. It's a simple model, and the second I say it, you're going to go, "Oh yeah, 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 I know all about that." Just didn't use that name. So the concept of why I started my program, Taekwondo to Excel, um, it's a program where basically I don't have a dojang. I've been teaching for probably 40 plus years, all just in community centers and places wherever I had, in churches where friends would let me use space. But I've been using the same model. And that model is provide opportunity, give recognition, teach real skills, and yeah, technical skills, but more importantly is the life skill, the social emotional skills, set clear standards, and develop trust. Those five big principles are the primary basis of 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 what I try to do in class. I also believe very strongly in persistent positive feedback. No negative input, no negative feedback, persistent positive feedback, which is challenging because there's always somewhere, some feelings are going to come up, somebody's going to do something, and something that's not intended to be hurtful, it's not intended to be negative, but the comment is a form of negative reinforcement. And so I always work hard, and the people who work with me and all the students who've ever been in my place know persistent positive feedback. And so those are the basic premises that I personally try to live by in school, but they're the foundations of why I think um, teaching instructors is important. They're the foundation of why I think about this concept a lot of how do we teach? How might we teach? What's the process of teaching? What should it look like? Um, and that I'm not talking about teaching technical stuff like kicks and punches. I always joke, and you've heard me say this many times. I go down any corner and get any old bum off the street to teach somebody how to kick and punch. Now we can argue all day about the quality of that kick and punch after they've been taught it, but that's not really the issue for me. The issue is how do we support parents who bring kids to our classrooms and understand the real reason why they bring them? And how do we support those young people in their evolving growth every day to become armed with social emotional skills that are going to help them make good decisions and better decisions in life on their journey to realize their dreams?
Well, you've hit on the subject, and one of the things that I think is important about the best education, better education systems for Taekwondo's methodology. And that is the concept or the idea that we're thinking about modern level masters and how we're going to teach them to do better. And I think I've heard you use this concept before when we're talking about this subject, certainly in the teachings that I've listened that you've done in that awesome program. But it's the idea of reverse engineering our outcomes. So when you speak about that, what is it that you hope a student would possess at the end when they're just becoming black belt? Certainly not the end, but that's the starting point to learn even more. But when they get to black belt, what are the objectives you have for them, and then how do you reverse engineer that backwards to get the outcomes you want?
Yeah, I can put it in simple words, but you and I both know it's not a simple process. For me, it's about watching that student's evolution through a skilled instructor's teaching process around the principles that I've been talking about in the classroom, where you can really see their independent growth around confidence, around how they're self-esteem has changed and grown and become powerful, and how they feel empowered by what they've learned in that class in terms of taking it out to the world outside of those walls, that brick and mortar or wherever it is, and 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 how they have learned how to be critical thinkers, because that's a process. You don't just get to say no. It's a process that you've got to learn how to do, that you have to think through to come to a good decision. And I I share with students and parents, because I have regular monthly meetings with parents, like I'm sure most everyone does or try to do, and that is, we have to help support our kids learn how to think about their behavior, not necessarily judging it as messaging that they would receive from their friends and their peers. Then not judging themselves at all, but just thinking about their behavior, thinking about what is it that I may want to do differently. Um, and if I can think about what I might do differently, how can I change that? Is it possible to change it? And if I can change it, then what's the process to do that? Um, so it's about understanding change, how to create change in yourself. Basically, I want to see somebody grow up from white belt to black belt if they stay that long, because we all know a lot of students leave way before they become a black belt. But the end product is, to me, you want to see someone who 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 walks tall, who's self-confident, who has a sense of independence, who has an identity, right? Who has that self-identity. And they're not afraid to express and ask questions. They're not afraid to make mistakes because they see those mistakes as their allies, their friends, as their teachers. They learn from that. And when they fall, it's okay because they're falling forward all the time. They're falling forward. And so for me, that's the end product that we as instructors or we as educators want to see in our students, are those kinds of human beings um, who are going to change the world.
So I couldn't agree more. And I like the idea of how you're approaching it. What do you think some of the biggest challenges you've had trying to teach the original or foundational Taekwondo ideals with the modern students, the students that are coming into the school now? Because they certainly are different than the type of students that came into the world in the 60s and 70s, and the reasons and who brought them in, actually. So is there a difference in the nature of the student, and does that necessitate a different methodology?
Uh, I I I think there is a difference. I mean, I think if we just open our eyes and look at where we live and think about history, history, 30, 40 years ago, it was a different world. Kids today have so much more coming at them, so much faster. They have so many more options and choices to make. They've got so many more things to look at and make decisions about, or run from and hide from. It's just so much more challenging. And so I think to further the term the modern day master in today's classroom, I really think has to be armed with a different set of skills than instructors were when I started. A whole different set of skills, because the kids are different. The world is different. And if we really believe that Taekwondo, that if a kid walks away from Taekwondo, they're better off in life, no matter how long they've been there, then we've got to take a few steps backwards and say, okay, what's the methodology by which we're training instructors to teach these these young kids who are thinkers. They're not necessarily, they're still like kids of the old days. Their decision making at that age still, needs a lot of work. But they think more, they have more coming at them, they have more choices, and they want to speak freely. And they want to participate in decision making. And they want to know why you said and what are you doing that for? And just say because I said so, do because I'm grandmaster doesn't back it. Because the information flies right over their head or goes out one ear and out the other ear, and they don't pay attention to it because it doesn't mean anything to them if we're not thinking about how we're engaging them in the classroom. I've had parents come to me who've been new to my class, and they say, "Oh, Master Preston, you let my son call you Leon," and I'm going, "Oh yeah, well, he's 9 years old, he's 8 years old, he's 6 years old, he'll learn. I'm not trying to forge 10 soldiers in here. I'm trying to forge human beings who recognize choice, who recognize behavior that's going to push them forward or behavior that's going to hold them back." And so for a modern day master or a modern day instructor or in today's classroom, I think instructors, they've got to understand things like they have to value theory. And if they can value theory, then they've got to value research connected to those theories. And if they can accept the research in some way, shape, or form, then it's how do you put that research into practice in the classroom, which is what we're talking about. How do you put that research into the classroom? And then it's like, how do you look at that practice in the classroom and cipher from that what we would call from an educational perspective, evidence-based practice. And then if you understand the notion of evidence-based practice, then we get down to the real nitty-gritty, which is what are best practices, right? And then we got something, what are best practices? And then we can begin talking about experiential learners for those few adults who are in our classes today, but also helping the young people understand the whole concept that, it's a little difficult for young people to just set them free and teach them on the same kind of basic adult model that we use in teaching adults. Kids, we've got to do a little bit more engaging and interacting with and talking to, not talking and talking. If a kid makes a mistake, no need to point that out to that kid in the group. You talk about it in general terms for everyone. Because why? Oh, they're blaming me, they're hurting me, they're talking, and it's not useful, it's not helpful in terms of getting to the ultimate, what I consider to be the ultimate dream, the ultimate goal of why Taekwondo in today's world. So that's a long kind of expansive answer to what you asked me, but I kind of look at it analytically like that because for me, I like to think about things in that bigger context. And I like to ask students to think about things in a bigger context. So if you make a decision, okay, let's talk about that. Why? How's it good? How's it bad? How's it hurting you? What does it mean for the other students in the class? What does it mean for when you go home? Blah, blah, blah. So they begin to think about their behavior. They begin to think about their technique. Oh, you did a front kick. Oh, you know what? That kick was amazing. Well, yeah, I can message that way. And it was amazing. And it's a good message. It's a feel-good message. But am I really teaching them a certain value? Teaching values in our classes, what we do. We don't call it that, but it's what we do. Hard work is a value. Effort is a value. So I could say, and I think we've talked about this before, yeah, amazing kick. But I want to message something more than, yeah, I want you to feel good, but I want you to understand that, hey, I can see you put in hard work. Your kick is looking 1,000 times better. Keep up the hard work. And by the way, pivot your hip, just whatever their comment may be, all within 15 seconds. the value is so much greater and the message is so much more powerful, but it stems from that expansive view of understanding a different methodology, a different way of teaching than the way I came up, the way I learned.
Well, I think that's one of the things that I've always respected and understood about you. When you have spoken, I've watched you speak to the referee group. I've watched you speak to the people who led our sport at the WTF level when we were working together in those committees, and you were steadfast in your thoughts, you were steadfast in your philosophy, but more importantly, you would try to find a way to bring people around to a place where they understood what you were trying to say and why you were trying to say it. And that's because you respect method and education. And, you know, towards that end, I have a question I'm going to ask you about that. But over the years, what lessons have you learned in the processes of learning how to teach that you're sharing or hope to share in this new WTMU program or the Better Education Systems programs that will help instructors develop themselves to a fuller capacity?
Well, yeah, that's another tough one, and it's quite deep actually. For me, some of the things that I've learned just from experience, and experience includes reading. You know, I've been many places around the world watching Taekwondo matches, as you said, refereeing Taekwondo matches, and I watch a white belt all the way to black belt matches. And many, and I watch a lot of instructors, and they'll get up, they won't pay attention to white belt fights. This is a generalized statement, of course. And I'm going, for me, I'm very purposeful as to why I do that, right? I remember a long time ago, there was this karate guy. I used to go to karate matches, and get disqualified every time I showed up. But there was this guy. I at the time I never thought he was that that good, but that was my worldview. But the guy was one of the best kind of point fighting karate guys out there, a heavyweight dude named Joe Louis.
Oh yeah.
And he and I were not friends or anything, but I how sometimes kids stand back and they hear things when nobody think they're listening, but they're listening. And I heard him say, and this stuck with me, and I think about it all the time. It's once a white belt, always a white belt. And I'm going to go, okay, what the hell does that mean? But for me, I took it as it's lifelong learning. And so when I go to look at my experiences that have made me think about things, is what am I trying to learn? I'm always trying to see what value is there out there. What's the takeaway? Because I believe there's a takeaway in every situation, no matter where it is. The question is, am I at a point where I can receive it, where I can see it, but more so, can I understand it? And so this is what I'd say about teaching, right? Is that we have to understand our students, and we have to allow ourselves to be open to our students' ability to engage with us on whatever level they can, to open the door to that that process of engaging and sharing information and understanding the human connection that we have in the classroom with those young people. And for me, that's the biggest lesson that I have ever learned. And it's just simply about listening. Now, I learned this all the way through graduate school, but I'm thinking of a different level. But it's listening is not the same as hearing sometimes, right? So because that's we've got to understand those messages from our young students before we can even begin to develop a connection with them, so that the teaching process can really start. You get those young kids out there, And if you're trying to do some agility drills or some kicking drills and they're stumbling around and falling down, their balance is really bad, they're crying, and mommy's over there chomping at the bit to come out there to save them. Uh, it's like, where's the communication? Where's the connection that's going to support that kid staying there and getting up and continuing to move down the line, right? And that's deeper than just saying, come on, get up, you can do it. It's fine to say that, but it's deeper than that. And for me, that's the thing about being a better instructor that I think about. And better doesn't mean bad. Not in any way I'm saying, are you a bad instructor? But it's, can we be better? Can we do better? Can we be stronger? And I think, yeah, we all can, if we allow ourselves not to have ego, right? There's a lot of young instructors, and nowadays who they're young, and they think what they're not sometimes, and they talk what they're not sometimes. And so, for me, I think it's just like, hey, let's all slow down and understand really who we're teaching, why we're teaching them, and what's the best pathway to do that.
And I share your feelings about Joe Louis. You got to remember, I'm sure you remember that he was a student of Bruce Lee's, and so pregnant in his thought process was a lot of the Tao of Bruce Lee's way, or the Jeet Kune Do, and Buddhist philosophy, right? So you can't teach something to someone when they already know everything they need to know. It's not until they realize, that they're empty, that you can fill that cup, right? There's that old Buddhist adage of the guy comes in and keeps pouring the tea and it overflows in the cup. And he's like, what are you doing? And he goes, just like you, the cup is, you're full, so you can't receive anything. And it's until you understand that you need to receive something. I had the good fortune of working with Master Lewis before he passed away in a number of seminars, and he was an amazing athlete and martial artist and a person, and he offered a lot to the students and his philosophy, much as you do. You had said something to me that I kind of want to touch on when we were working on the first coaching program that we worked on together. And you said, I was trying to explain how I thought about teaching and education, and you were sharing with me how you thought about it. And I said, one of the biggest challenges I think that we have is the perception of referees vis-a-vis athletes and coaches. Coaches and athletes look at the referee as an enemy. The referee is not scoring my point. The referee is stopping me from doing what I want to do. And you said a quote to me that I never forgotten. It changed the way that I looked at it. And you said, my job as a referee is to make sure that the game remains beautiful, that I make the game as beautiful as I can. And that means that I have to stop negative behavior so that the game, the integrity of the beauty of Taekwondo can be demonstrated. So I'd like you to talk to our listeners a little bit about that, because that was such a profound statement that changed the way that I looked at the game, and certainly looked at the way that I fought after that.
Yeah. Refereeing, as you know, is not an easy thing to do. I've refereed basketball. I've refereed high school basketball. I've refereed college basketball. I've refereed in the NBA Pro-Am League. And to me, I liken Taekwondo to basketball refereeing a little bit. Football referee, I've never done that, but to me, it's not easy, but it's a much more distinctively clear. In basketball, you got people pushing and bumping and grabbing and crying all the time, and I didn't do this and they did that, and you only got limited eyes to see things that happen in a nanosecond. Well, that's the same thing in Taekwondo. And so having played sports all my life, um, um, from grade school to high school. I went all the way through college on a 4-year football scholarship. And I had some decisions to make after that as to whether or not I wanted to go to a different level. But it's like, who has the most to gain and who has the most to lose in a match? And from my perspective, the referee has a huge responsibility that goes beyond just knowing the rules in the rule book that's printed in black and white, right? I think most every referee knows the rules. I don't think that's the challenge of being a referee, is knowing the rules. I think they know the rules. The challenge is, how do we stand in the midst of a continual hurricane, is how I look at it. It's a barrage of things that are flying around in there all the time on a continual basis. And so the question becomes, we have an obligation to maintain an atmosphere that protects the integrity of the game. How do we do that? Well, as you know, there's advantage and there's disadvantage. And there's perceived advantage that turns into disadvantage. And there's all these dynamics that go on. If a referee doesn't understand those dynamics and doesn't know how to anticipate and interpret those dynamics, then the referee, I don't think is, from my perspective, this is not capable of protecting the game, but also not capable of protecting the best interests of the athlete. That's our job, I think. It's not to say, oh, it's my turn to referee or it's my turn to go here or there. It's to protect the game, it's protect the best interests of the athletes. And the only way we can do that is to understand the way the fight is evolved from beginning to end, and all the dynamics that go on in the middle. I hear players and coaches all the time say, well, I did this back in, the referee didn't see it, or well, I did that. And my response to that is no. There's no fighter that can do something that the referee can't see. Now, the question becomes why the referee didn't call that. Or the referee might have saw it, but what did they think? Did they think it wasn't? Did they think? So there's all these dynamics. But I just think if the referee doesn't really understand the game or the fight and how things evolve in that match, then the integrity of the game and the beauty of the game is lost. Which, by the way, I think a lot of the rules that have evolved over the last 10, 15 years all has to do not with the way fighters have capacity to fight, but it has to do with two things. One is the electronics, and two is folks making rules because they want to make sure referees didn't cheat them or referees didn't miss something, or which to me is all the wrong questions. And so you get wrong answers. But no, I really think it's the referee's job to assure that the beauty of the sport stays on the top, so that athletes have the ability to do the dynamic things they can do, and to do the high impact things they can do. But they have to have the opportunity and not be held back by somebody who's holding them and grabbing them and doing some things they're not supposed to be doing, which some folks are going to do.
But it leads me into a second thing that you said, and when we had this discussion over the years, and it'll get me to a third question that I want to ask. But the second question was, we were talking about, and we had been on the ground level when the electronic scoring was trying to be implemented, and we created and implemented the multi-tiered sport point system that was before and wasn't necessarily supposed to be used with electronic scoring. And one of the problems with the original electronic scoring, which was the button method with the hands, was you said, which is true, the athlete's ability to perform multiple techniques in real time has exceeded the ability of a referee to physically push the buttons in response. And it necessitates, which is one of the things that you said, that the referee understand the game to a certain level so that they can anticipate what may happen and then see if it occurs. And the example I can give you of this is if someone were to round kick to the backside of the body, as a taekwondo player, you know what the potential counters are for that. You know what patachuggi is, you know what this is. If an athlete's going to round kick to the stomach, you know one of the potential counters is back kick. So as a referee with buttons, if when it was buttons or whatever, you'd have to have the physical ability to press that button if it happened. You couldn't wait till it happened because the window would close for the opportunity. But that was the problem with the original electronic scoring. And this electronic scoring has a different set of problems. And Dr. Kapner and you shared that thought process as well, as far as specifically. And I agree with you that a referee needs the ability to have enough experience and understanding of the game to predict what might occur and then see if it does in fact occur to be able to score it. It's at least now. I guess the question that arises from all of that is it possible? What changes would you see that would be necessary to return the game to a form that it was closer in its original intent, which was a full contact martial art based on power and speed, as opposed to just we've removed the referee out of the equation. So if it hits the chest protector, regardless of what it is, technique or not a technique, it goes up, and because of the lack of the referee to change that, it stays up. So what would you see as a potential solution to address the deficiencies in today's, and I'm assuming they're deficiencies or challenges in today's game, to get it to a place where it could return to some sort of semblance of what it used to be, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a challenging question. You know, it's I agree with you. The taekwondo matches have changed a lot. In some ways now, I think there's a little, I don't know if it's effort or a natural evolution or something. It's starting to come back a tiny bit, because when I look at, irrespective of what the rules are or who did what, it's like, who's winning around the world and what are they doing in spite of the rules? Now, let me say this first. I've always felt electronic scoring, I don't really have a big issue with electronic scoring, but I think it can't be by itself. I think there has to be a merger of human and electronics, some kind of way, so that when things could be corrected and should be corrected, that electronics won't allow you to do, you can do it. The referee could do that, because the referee is the one in charge of the ring. And so that's one. We've got to look deeper and broader at how that can happen. I think the move to manage the way lead leg techniques evolved into what it has been up until probably a year or two ago. I know they're trying to work with that, manage it back a little bit, but you know, it makes me think that somehow the rules came around that I think they were trying to get rid of one way of somebody using a lead leg, and they started this other lead leg thing to counteract the way that one person was doing it. And so it evolved into something I don't think anybody anticipated, which is that, you know, the kind of tiki-tack, I call it tiki-tack kind of taekwondo that evolved out of that. And I'm not so sure that was the intent. But my point is this: Taekwondo, if we really want to see the dynamic beauty of Taekwondo, then we've got to have rules um, and people who understand the application of the rules that allow players to do what Taekwondo is capable of doing in terms of exhibiting its high level potential of techniques. So the idea of, but let me say this. I was going to say earlier, the fighters I see winning the most are those guys and those young ladies who are active. They're active, either they're agitating the distance, they're moving, they're faking, they're cutting, they're using dynamic angles to cut, to counter, to do many kinds of techniques. And they're not just stuck on a lead leg thing or one technique or two techniques. They're really going out there to fight. And those are the fighters I see who are now those fighters always, in my opinion, had an advantage. And somewhere they got kind of lost in the middle. Now I see they're starting to come back. Those fighters who are on top of the world, those are the ones I see winning a lot. There's probably a lot of reasons why that is. But I think we've got to reward activity. We've got to reward activity. And I think that's way back in the day, as you said, when we were sitting in the room talking to the WTF about that, and you were not your Zen self in that meeting. It's that's what we've got to think about: is how do we reward difficult techniques, and how do we reward high-level combinations? Because that's incentive, right? And athletes, they're athletes. They're going to do whatever they think they can do to get them ahead. And if you say this and this and this is really going to mean that, those who are committed to the craft of fighting, they're going to find a way to put that in their repertoire. And so I think it's a combination of those kind of things that are really going to begin to boost Taekwondo up again. But at the same time, now you got to have electronic equipment that's capable of handling those kind of things, right? To your point about pushing buttons and handling them, it's not easy to, see a whole bunch of stuff and push a button within 1 second. I think that's one of the reasons why the electronic stuff is good, but it still needs some work in terms of how can we help it do better and reward athletes to the max.
I think that, and I'll share one story along the same lines of the reactivity. I was fortunate enough to serve in my community in an elected position, and my police chief called me and asked me if I would take part in an armed shooter drill in a school. They were going to practice situations, and he wanted me to see what the police did and how they trained. And this was probably during a time where there were some policing issues, not in our community, but certainly in communities around the world. And so I said, of course. And so I watched what they did and how they did it. And then they said, would you like to try? And so they gave me one of these real guns, but instead of bullets, it had wooden bullets with chalk on them, so you could see where they hit. And they gave me a scenario. They said, go into this room. In this room is a distraught parent. His wife has the child. He's come to the school with a gun, armed. He wants his daughter. We want you to go in and diffuse the situation. So I go in, and as soon as I go in, I see the guy, and he's acting distraught. He's saying all this stuff. And I said, sir, are you okay? Can I talk to you for a minute? I just want my daughter, blah, blah. Next thing I know, he shoots me. Right? I get hit with the wooden bullet and the blue chalk on myself. And so they're like, okay, well, also look to your left. There was another guy over there with a gun. look over here. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I remembered all that OODA loop stuff that I was teaching in my courses. So I go outside and I say, okay, they say, okay, we want you to try again, find cover, do this. I said, can I shoot him? So they go, yeah, and I go, okay. I go in the room and same scenario starts. He raises his gun and I shoot him. They go, what did you shoot him for? I said, he was going to kill himself anyway. The reason I tell the story, the funny part about it is what it is. But until you're in that moment where you realize, because they had a second part of the drill is go in and shoot only bad guys, not good guys. And that moment where you got to make that decision to pull the trigger to shoot a good guy or a bad guy, you have to in an instant determine that moment and whether it's accurate or not, and the amount of mistakes. So I had a newfound respect for the police, obviously, and their situation. But to be honest, for referees, I don't like refereeing because I didn't even like to referee 5-year-olds because I felt bad not doing it well enough and making somebody lose as a result of it, having been on both sides of that coin. So that the idea that an individual can pay attention for 10 hours a day and get it right with an electronic thing in his hand is challenging. I was much more a fan of I like power based systems. So like there are electronic systems that are power based. So much like a video game, you hit it because the argument had always been, hey, if you hit the arm and it hits the chest, that'll score. And I'm like, if you can hit somebody's arm hard enough where it scores on the chest, that should be a point. We're supposed to be a power-based martial art. And I still believe that it would be easier to correct the refereeing issue than it would be to find an electronic chest protector that could discern that this is a technique and this is not. And I know that we've had this conversation, you, myself, and Dr. Kapner, ad infinitum, but we still have a long way to go to get back to zero. Not we, but the global we took the easy way out. We found a system that was equally unfair to everyone. And athletes, you can't blame them, right? Athletes are going to do what athletes do.
Yeah. Herb, what I would say to that is, if you think about it, in that ring, or in that competition area, the person with the least amount of training time and the least amount of scenarios where they are compelled to think critically and analytically about what they see and what's going on in terms of training is the referee. Now you think about it, their referees get some training, but compared to the people they're in the ring with, and compared to the skill level of the people they're in the ring with, referee training, so you see where I'm going with this. Referee training has got to get better. It's got to get, when I say better, I mean more. And not just reading from a book, okay? I recall when I was trying to work my way up the referee ranks in basketball. I think I refereed in the nowadays they call it the D League. In those days it was the Pro-Am League. We read the book and then they said, hey, you better know the rules. Now come on out here because we're gonna run up and down this court all day refereeing games. And we're gonna analyze you critically and analytically up and down and sideways. And it's feedback. And so don't get upset about it. Don't think, we're picking on you, but it's how you learn how to be in the ring or be on the court with highly skilled people, anticipate things, see things that you would not normally see. And so I say that to only say, to add to what you're saying, is that if we want to preserve the beauty of the game and protect the sport, then the education and training of referees has got to escalate a millionfold. And you're right. Nobody can sit in a chair all day long. It's ridiculous. And so when coaches say, "Oh, why didn't you say it to me?" Yeah. Mentally, you know, anybody who understands human behavior and the human mind know that your attention span is going to be gone. You're going to be numb. I remember sitting in the ring at the Olympic Games, a final match of the women's heavyweight match in 2008 in Beijing, China. And I'm sitting in this chair, and it was against one of the top, well, the two, I thought who were the two, not just because they were in the finals, but all for many years they've been top fighters. Woman from Great Britain and a woman from China. And the whole match, they bounced and bounced and bounced. They made it through. They might have thrown 2 or 3 kicks. Now, common sense would tell everybody, you're sitting there, and nothing's going on. Nothing's going on. Where's your mind going? Nothing's going on. Nothing's going on. Where's your mind going? So in the last few seconds of the third round, it was like boom, boom, boom. And it's like, you go, and the second you do that, the window's shut. You can't push anything, right? Anyway, my point is about being able to anticipate to see things. Yes, but also you can't sit around and not have rest. You got to refresh your mind. It's kind of like a fighter. Okay, if you want to, yeah, you probably can fight 3 rounds. You think you fighting hard for 3 rounds, but you're not moving every second. You're in attack distance. You're attacking. You move out to alert distance, what I call alert distance. Yeah, you're not used to, but you move out to safety area. You're getting your rest. But referees are not getting that sitting in chairs all day long. So what? That means some organizations have got to invest money into training referees if you want a better outcome in matches, and don't make systems to take the place of referees when the problem was maybe not. But you got to look at what you're doing. You didn't train the referees at a level where they should have been trained, and so you got what you got.
That's a great point. I mean, there's all this emphasis put on and driven by the national governing bodies to develop the best teams and the best athletes. And all of that happens at the expense of the countries. The one organization that has the responsibility for the training and conduct of the event and actually conducting the event, the WT, doesn't invest in the very thing that is going to showcase those athletes. So they'll invest in television screens and backgrounds and elevated platforms.
Mm-hmm.
But the most important aspect of what's going to make that match happen well are the referees. And it's the least amount of effort and money that's spent. That's like, having this amazing event occur inside a glass cage or windowed facility, and then you don't clean the glass. So what do you expect to see? You haven't provided a fertile area for the thing to be viewed in its beauty. And then imagine if you had a basketball game like that and you didn't have the best quality referees that you could have, and you're not going to get the best outcomes. So, I mean, it's another conversation. We're going to have more of these types of conversations with myself and you and Dr. Kapner on a separate podcast where we talk about what the future is of Olympic style Taekwondo and what's happened to what used to be a bifurcation between the martial art and the physical sport. Now there's a trifurcation between the sport. In other words, what do you have to do to win in the sport, and what connectivity does that have to do with the martial art itself? And then the actual things that you might use that would be effective. Because what's happened now is there's a third level of training necessary just to win. You have to do all these things that don't have any practical impact whatsoever, including the front leg stuff, and then not connected back to a technique that really originally would be hurtful. There was a time when all you had to do if you wanted to train for sport Taekwondo was do Taekwondo, because a round kick had to be delivered with sufficient power in order for it to score. And if you had to deliver with that power, it made it susceptible to back kick or back hook kick. Well, if you don't have to do that any longer, you can just kind of lift your leg and touch the chest protector, make contact. It de-elevates the need for, or the ability for, a counter to occur. So now you have what people would call the art of Taekwondo and Pumse and the other things that we do. And now you have us that still teach it, what we consider to be power and Taekwondo and real Taekwondo technique. And then we find ourselves having to teach athletes in our school a different type of Taekwondo to be able to compete if they wanted to at the Olympic Games. And, I, for one, just to be honest, I can't watch it. I tried today to watch the qualifier for the Olympics, and I couldn't find a minute or two to watch. And it was a shame because I see athletes that are obviously athletic and have ability, but they don't need to do anything more. They don't step any longer. They don't do counters any longer. They pretty much push and grab, which was probably one of the worst decisions made by the WT, and it was perpetuated by Yang Jinban, and this idea that you need to push that so people won't grab. No, just tell people not to grab and punish them grabbing. So this is why we see what we see. But that's going to be a conversation for a different day. I want to go back and finish up with what are your thoughts and hopes for this best education program that we're working on and we're rolling out? What do you see as its impact for the modern day Taekwondo master?
Well, my hopes and what I think outcomes can look like is instructors in Taekwondo schools who are highly qualified to teach in that they meet certain competencies, that there's competencies related to teaching skills that they are taught, or if they know, that we make them better at it, and that they actually have the confidence to go out into a classroom and understand that there's every good reason in the world why it's good to have a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old in Taekwondo. And I know there's a lot of schools out there that they'll take them in so they babysit them and have them run around and play, and it's about collecting the dollar. Really, it's not about teaching them real Taekwondo or real skills. I'm not knocking making money, but my point is we have to understand as instructors that age group, there's certain very fundamental facts about their behavior, about their growth and development at that age that we need to know. And then we can understand why little Herbie bit little Johnny in his ear and he's 4 years old because he took his toy. So having instructors who really understand from a competency base what it really means to teach a particular skill or to teach a particular behavior process that we're talking about. How does that get introduced? How is it demonstrated? Things that you've talked about before in the idea method, and do that every single time with every single thing, every single class, so that it's clear without any doubt, any question, what the student's doing. Clear meaning clear to the student. Okay, why am I doing it? What am I doing? How do I do it? And then give them a chance to practice it, instruct. So there's some methodology. I guess that's my point. There's some methodology to the actual teaching process that is rooted. I'm going back again, that is rooted in some theoretical research, practical base that says this is best practice when it comes to teaching and learning. And that's what's going to keep our students in the classroom too. I really believe that, because that goes to building relationships, it goes to building trust, and it goes back to building confidence and trust from the parents and the community as to why they really put those kids in Taekwondo class in the first place. So if I had a vision of what it would look like, that's partially what it would look like. That's what instructors would be doing. And I would add, you didn't ask me about this, but I would add this way back on the front end, is that Taekwondo education in the 21st century has to really be thought with great depth and breadth right now, because we have every manner of anybody teaching Taekwondo. Um, and okay, I'm not going to try to judge them too hard, but the point is that Taekwondo schools, I think, in the modern world, the 21st century, with 21st century instructors, 21st century black belts, the modern day black belt, must be teaching in schools that have some competency base to them. If that's what because those kids, those families, they deserve that. And so we should have Taekwondo schools that have some kind of thing that says, yeah, this school, they're for real up in there. And here's what they've done to be real.
So I couldn't agree more. And I think that one of the exciting things that people can look forward to, and I'm certainly looking forward to, I haven't been this excited about a program in quite some time, is the licensure program. And we're going to talk about that in another podcast. But we, together as a group of master instructors who have been doing this sport for quite some time, need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. We need to hold the organizations that we participate in to a higher standard. But most importantly, we need to hold our art to a higher standard. So as we move forward with this competency-based learning approach and the licensure program to bring people to a common understanding, it will become the good housekeeping seal of Taekwondo teaching. And those that participate in it, I think, will be better for the experience, whether or not they go down the licensed path or not. And I can only tell you that when I went to the WTMU event the first time around, being invited to lecture and then to participate, I was revitalized because of the 300 or 400 instructors who were there trying to learn. They wanted information. They were happy. It was nice to be surrounded by all these people who shared a common interest and love of the thing that we have all spent our lives doing, whether it's professionally or avocationally. So as we continue down this path and raise our level, I think we can continue to be the premier organization and sport and art. I'm going to have the conversation about the Olympic sport in a different breath, because that would be too easy to waste time on and not really have a great conversation about. But the art itself and what we teach and what we do with life skill development is so important that we can't just shirk our responsibility. On the other side of that, we have to continue to maintain our steadfastness as diplomats for the sport and as torchbearers for the sport that keep the light facing in the direction that it needs to. As you said before, we need to continue ourselves to be lifelong students and fall forward towards a better future for what we do. With regard to where we're headed now, I'm excited that in this next go around, we'll have an opportunity to roll this out to a handful of instructors that will be selected in the first educational group to participate and become licensed schools. And so as you're listening to this podcast, we hope that you're one of those schools that and instructors that joins us on this journey of self-exploration and growth, because all of us learn by doing, and all of us learn by teaching, and you can only learn through better teaching, which is what I hope we do. But I want to thank you, Grandmaster Preston, for spending time with us today and with me and sharing your thoughts and vision. We're going to be doing a number of these, and this is just the first in the series. But as someone who has been an athlete who's been refereed by you, someone who has been a junior of yours for many years and watched the great athletes who have come out of your area and competed against many of them, and then as someone who's learned a great deal from you, and then had the honor to be a colleague in the development of some previous programs, and certainly now this one, your insights are poignant and on topic, and your passion for education is evident in every way that you look at it. I wish I could have had your delivery method. I would have survived many more things in my life in your method of speaking. But again, on behalf of everyone who may be listening, I want to thank you for your service and thank you for participating today.
Well, I thank you so much. I'm truly humbled by the opportunity, and and I'm I'm blessed in so many ways to have had a life experience of meeting and working and learning from young men like yourself and a number of others who only make me who I am. So thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I hope you found that as exciting as I did and informational, but more importantly, inspiring. Master Preston is an amazing individual who shares his passion with everyone, and it's infectious. Remember to join us on our other Masters Alliance podcast, Uncut, and learn more about the Olympic sport that we all love and practice. Until next time, this is Herb Perez.